These are the hard mornings, I think, to do programs like this because the horror and the heartbreak is just so much. I mean, watching the images coming out of Israel, but also trying to get your head around what it means for the world. The attacks on 10/7 in Israel were that nation's 9/11. The shock, the horror, the elimination of any sort of complacency we had that the world was a comprehensible place. And as I wrote in my morning shots this morning, 20 years ago, George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil. And back then it was Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. But today, this Monday, we have our own axis of evil. And it is Russia, it is Iran, and it is Hamas. And to break it all down, including the way the zone is being flooded with disinformation and moral equivalency, we're joined, of course, by my colleague, Will Salatin. Will, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Charlie. I wish I had some cute sports talk for today, but with all this tragedy and death, yep.
No, we might as well dive into it because there is so much. I mean, I think the anticipation was that we would be talking about, hey, the chaos of the House of Representatives. And this is one of those reminders that, there is a reason why it is a really bad idea to even think about shutting down the U.S. government right now. It's a terrible idea to be playing political games with the U.S. military. And what an awful time to be without a Speaker of the House of Representatives. And by the way, those are like the least important things for us to talk about this morning. So where do you want to start here? Will, where do you want to start this vicious surprise attack by Hamas, which is going to lead to an absolutely righteous but terrible response from Israel? What do you think?
Well, first of
Where do
all,
we start?
I think Americans have trouble grappling with the magnitude of this because Israel's a much smaller country, obviously. So basically, we have about 35 times the population of Israel.
Right.
And they have, as of this morning, reporting about 700 deaths.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be, in American terms, that's about 8 times the size of 9/11 in terms of proportional to their population. And that's just the number of deaths. The nature of it is horrific. This isn't, obviously we had planes flying into buildings. They just had, 1,000 or so Hamas, they're called fighters. They're not really fighters. They're, rapists and murderers. They went into homes. They murdered people. They went to, as you saw, I think you reported, a music festival that was supposed to be celebrating peace and love.
Right.
Yeah.
And they just gunned people down.
They went in there,
hundreds,
just mowed people down.
Yeah.
Right. At least 100. I've seen upwards of 200 reported. They dragged away children, old people, Holocaust survivors. They targeted civilian populations. Right. So it's a horrific attack, both in its quantity and in the nature of it.
Well, and the way that they are taking videos of some of their worst atrocities as if to celebrate them, blowing up ambulances, naked women in the backs of trucks, the bodies in the backs of trucks, the murder of children. The barbarity of it is overwhelming. But there's also the shock of the incredible failure of intelligence that allowed this to take place. I mean, Israel has one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in the world. I mean, so do we. And yet Hamas pulled this off. And, yes, it doesn't detract anything from the barbarism to say that this was sophisticated. There was a land, sea, and air attack. They launched thousands of rockets. Then they used bulldozers to break through the wall. They had terrorists with hang gliders landing and securing territory that enabled them to move ahead. It appears to have been incredibly well planned and well orchestrated on a mass scale. How is it too early to go into how did this happen? How did this happen to a country that has such a sophisticated understanding of its enemy as Israel?
Well, all of the statements from public officials in Israel and the United States are, let's not do second guessing of the intelligence. Right now, we need to focus that. I hear that.
Yeah.
But you and I are not subject to that. This was a massive intel, and it's as you point out, Israel is supposed to be like the best country at intelligence.
Best. Right.
Right. And they have to be. They're surrounded by enemies. There's constantly plotting against them. So it is shocking that they missed this. This is, I believe, more than 2,000 rockets. I'm not sure what the eventual number will be. The rocket parts, by the way, are exactly what Israel tries to prevent from going into Gaza, right? There's a lot of screening of what goes in there. And they have massive, first of all, they have electronic surveillance. They have human intelligence that was supposed to penetrate this. But to miss all of this, to miss all of the methods, the attack itself, the rocket parts, the hardware that went into this, just shocking, just a shocking failure. And this Israeli government, I know part of me is saying, Charlie, let's not get into recriminations.
No, I know. Well,
they had one job.
We can do that. Yeah, right.
This was Benjamin Netanyahu. This is Likud.
Right.
They have one job, and it is security, and they failed.
Did the incredible division in the country, the political division in the country over the judicial reform, was it a distraction? Did it actually degrade Israel's ability to anticipate and stop this? Do we have any idea? I mean, by the way, that's got to be a big question. Whenever the second guessing starts, that's got to be one of the central questions, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there is in a situation like this, there's a lot of attribution of, if only we had done this, if only this hadn't been the case. I don't believe any of that. This attack it's the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. Hamas planned this. They've been building it for a long time. But what exactly precipitated it, whether the Saudis, imagine that the Saudis already had signed a deal with Israel. There was already a recognition and all a treaty and all
would
that.
Have happened
they would have done it anyway. Absolutely. They did it when they could, and they did it on this anniversary. Okay,
so there's two levels of, I think, intelligence failure here. One is how did they not see that they were assembling this attack? You know, the missiles, the hang gliders, the fighters, all of that. That's the sort of the hardware version of it. The software version of it is the larger intelligence failure is the really fun, and I want to get your take on this, the really fundamental misunderstanding of Hamas and what Hamas was capable of doing and what Iran was capable of doing. There's a lot of naivete, I think, some belief that, well, Hamas may have been a terrorist organization, but they wouldn't do this. Iran, we can actually negotiate with them. We can do, and we're going to get to the whole Biden administration and the spin on that, the deal they just cut with Iran. But it strikes me as kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of our existing axis of evil, I guess. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
So I saw some of the background for this was that Israel thought that Hamas was not going to do something like this because Israel was trying to be. Look, Charlie, there's no way for us to talk about this topic without pissing off a bunch of people.
Yeah, fine. I'm down with that.
So for those of you who believe that what Israel is doing in Gaza is unjust and resistance is necessary and all that stuff, sorry, but what I'm about to say, Israel was trying to be kinder, gentler with the people in Gaza. Great. And to be fair about the situation in Gaza, Gaza is a giant hostage situation in which a bunch of militant killers control a territory in which a lot of innocent people live, and it's very difficult to get to one without accidentally hurting the other. One of the things that Israel had done, Israel had just recently allowed a lot more work permits for people in Gaza to come into, because economic development, in theory, if you believe in helping the people of Gaza and trying to encourage them to abandon militancy, economic development and seeing that there's a better life for them in peace and in cooperation, that was part of the strategy. And so there were something like 15,000 work permits given out. And the Israeli authorities apparently thought that Gaza was going to be quiet because of that. And that seems to have been a mistaken bet. And so one of the tragedies coming out of this, Charlie, is that voices inside the Israeli government and in Israel in general who believe that being nice to Palestinians doesn't work and that you can only show them the fist, those people have gained credibility as a result of this attack. I don't agree with those people, but they've gained credibility.
So just a little bit of background here. Israel withdrew from Gaza, about 15 years ago? More than 15 years ago, right?
Right.
But then the decision was made to allow Hamas to participate in the elections, and Hamas won those elections. So in retrospect, huge mistake, miscalculation, thinking that, hey, let's let Hamas act like a regular political party in government, and maybe they won't be bloodthirsty terrorists. I mean, we can do a lot of retrospective. That was also naive, underestimating the impact of allowing Hamas to participate in those elections.
And this is a constant frustration for anyone who deals with the issue of Palestine.
Yeah.
You have constantly attempts to separate the extremists from the moderates, and very often the moderates just turn out to not be very moderate, and the public
Fatah,
itself supporting right. I saw shortly after this attack was underway, and it was clear that it was barbaric and awful. I saw in CNN a supposedly moderate Palestinian politician, Mustafa Barghouti, was being interviewed, and Christiane Amanpour is trying to tee this guy up. She's saying, "But of course, Hamas is your enemy. And he's like, "No, Hamas isn't our enemy. Israel's our enemy." And I'm like, "This is the moderate.
You're the moderate." Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's dive into this whole Iran situation, because clearly it looks like Iran was funding, arming them. Hamas is saying that Iran was behind a big Wall Street Journal exclusive story this morning, talking about Iran being part of the planning of all of this. The Biden administration just cut a deal with Iran. And of course, this is becoming now a partisan cudgel. A lot of disinformation, misinformation about the $6 billion in Iranian assets that were unfrozen. Now, we'll talk about the fact check on that in a moment. But this has been seized on from a political point of view. I mean, to score political points, saying, there are people like Rick Scott and Tim Scott out there saying that the Biden administration funded this attack. And I think they're referring to the Iranian money, but also the fact that we've been giving a lot of aid to Gaza as well. So let's sort through all of this. Bad look for the Biden administration that it cut a deal with Iran, or just a lot of totally disingenuous demagoguery by the Republican critics? Where do you come down, Will?
Both. Why not both?
All right. Interesting. Okay.
It's not causally related, but it does look terrible. I mean, this is the way American politics is sorted out. Republicans are the anti-Iran party, isolate Iran, right? And Democrats are the, if we make nice with the moderates, we can somehow encourage positive developments. And then this happens, right? Yeah. And just to be clear, we don't yet have solid intel, although everybody believes that Iran is behind this. You don't get all those rockets in Gaza without Iran.
Hamas is saying Iran did it. I mean, let's, for the sake of this assumption that Iran is like deep in all of this. Okay, right. The $6 billion, I think we need to make it clear, the $6 billion itself did not finance it, okay? The money, because the money has not yet been released. Now, the U.S. government says it's only for humanitarian use, but come on, let's not be naive. Money is fungible. I give you $6 billion. You have to spend it on your garden. You're also going to be able to afford whatever you want to do. But I guess to your point, though, this goes back to the way Israel, perhaps uncharacteristically, naively underestimated what Hamas was capable of. Even cutting a deal with Iran seems in retrospect to have been based on assumptions of their moderation or their restraint that were have not aged well.
No. And Charlie, we did this to get out. The $6 billion was part of a deal to get out how many American hostages? Like 5? Yeah. Okay. There's now at least 150 hostages that just got taken, and they're inside Gaza. They're in tunnels. They're already apparently supposedly being killed in some of the airstrikes because they're human shields for. Right. So we've multiplied by 30 at least the number of hostages, and the $6 billion is out the door.
Which is why we once said we never negotiated with hostages. With terrorists. That's why we once said we never negotiated with terrorists.
Right. It's a bad look, and it's a bad bet. And again, as in the situation in Gaza, the voices who say we need to be harder, we need to be tougher, we need to be more of isolating of Iran have gained credibility with this but by the way, Charlie, it would be so much better for the people of Gaza if we had better intelligence linking this to Iran, like clearly, because it would be so much better if the retaliation were focused on Iran.
Ooh, but that's a wider war, though. What are you asking for?
Okay.
Will, where are we going here?
All right. So there are ways to retaliate that are not necessarily about dropping bombs. What I'm really concerned about, Charlie, is we're going, and I don't want to jump ahead of the conversation, but there's going to be the carnage in Gaza like you would not believe. And it is absolutely horrific and terrible that innocent people in Gaza are going to pay the price for this. And I'm not necessarily saying,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not necessarily saying that Israel is wrong to take revenge, to take a deterrent action. But even if you believe that Hamas is responsible for what's happening in Gaza, it's terrible for the innocent people there.
It is, but here's also where there's not symmetry. The Israeli military forces are warning the civilian population to evacuate. They're saying, "Look, this is what you should do. You should not be in these areas." This was not something that Hamas did for Israelis. So it is not. There is not a moral equivalence between what happened over the weekend and what is about to happen. The what is about to happen is solely the responsibility of Hamas. This is an intentional thing that they did. They were hoping, they are planning on, as you point out, using civilians as human shields, not just Israeli civilians, but their own civilians. So they are unleashing intentionally this wave of terror on their own people.
Yes, yes. And so it's very important that everybody understands what Hamas's mentality is. You're not dealing with people like you and me. You're not dealing with people for whom the death is tragic and horrible. I mean, Hamas is a martyr culture. And that's part of the problem that Israel has is it's surrounded by a lot of these people who believe in martyrdom. In a normal deterrent situation, Charlie, you or I could say, look, you mess with us, we mess with you. Right? You kill us, we kill you, we kill you. But you kill people in Gaza, and Hamas celebrates that. All the death and destruction, it makes Israel look bad, and if Hamas fighters die, that's martyrdom. They celebrate, they glorify the violence. So that's why what Israel has to do in situations like this, they have to prevent them, because once the killing starts, you're just helping the militants and the martyrs.
Yeah, but by the way, we should just mention here, because we talked about Israel's policy toward Gaza. Some of the commentary that I'm seeing seems to miss the fact that Israel no longer occupies Gaza, that they withdrew from Gaza. I think that seems like a relevant point, especially when we're seeing some of the comments, particularly on the left, about Israel being an apartheid state, and we need to end the U.S. military, U.S. Support for Israeli occupation. Israel is not occupying Gaza anymore. I mean, isn't that's kind of a significant baseline point when we're discussing this?
So yes, Israel doesn't occupy Gaza anymore, and they tried. Withdrawal was part of an attempt to see if if a kinder, gentler approach would work. But let's not gloss over the massive blockade that's going on. Right, that Gaza is completely trapped there. It's a terrible situation for Israel. What would we do if we had a population a quarter of our size sitting on our border and like firing rockets in, and it's very difficult to avoid doing something.
I understand this, and by the way, so we have Hezbollah, who is sitting on another border firing rockets as well. Mona Charen has a great piece in the Bulwark about all of this with a little bit of the background, and also pointing out, don't try to draw some moral equivalency between what Hamas is doing and what Israel is about to do. She writes, Hamas calculates that we'll be able to use the imagery and reality of Palestinian grief and suffering to hurt Israel again, and perhaps even to draw Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy, to join the conflict. Hezbollah has about 130,000 missiles in Lebanon and commands 20,000 active fighters along with 20,000 reserves. On Sunday, there were short exchanges of fire between Israel and Hezbollah, suggesting that they are on a hair trigger already. So there's a real danger that this could escalate and this could spread, particularly as Israel launches, fire and fury on Gaza, and that is going to be, when I said it's going to be righteous and terrible, I meant, capitalize. I mean, it will be. I'm not criticizing it. But it will be very, very dramatic. And so the question is, what will the rest of the world do? What will Iran do? What will Hezbollah do? What will we just don't know. What will Saudi Arabia say? What does this mean for the future of diplomacy? The fact that so much of the Arab world, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, etc., put out statements essentially blaming Israel for all of this. I think that this is this changes everything in terms of diplomacy, right? For people who thought that we were going to somehow ease into a post-Abraham Accord, kumbaya world, I'm not seeing it.
No, no, and of course, part of the point of it was to derail that vision, right?
Well, successful.
For anyone who has studied the Middle East or followed the history of the Middle East, this is how it always happens. There are so many forces, there are so many people involved who are invested in violence, who are invested in warfare. And even though most, Jews, most Arabs want peace, it's really difficult to do that when 1,000 guys can go execute an operation like this and trigger a massive conflagration.